come again, my friend. Alright. So then, it has begun again. Ooh. You know what I realized? Talking to a mirror is totally different to talking to a camera right now. When I look at it, I completely forget whatever was in my mind. Well, sure. First, as our ritual commands, let me just start. Okay, I started right now. Alright. So, as usual, I need something to amuse myself with, so I got some chocolates. I feel like I should be looking at the camera when I am talking. It is quite weird, to be honest. Alright then, so the one thing I want to talk about is about the functions of the self. I've written down some notes. Trying to understand this whole thing. It all starts with the first question. What is the self? Really? What is the self? And I'm not really clear about that. The self could be the collective experience of the observer, as I see it. You know, the clear divide which is present between me and the rest of the universe. That experience is what we generally refer to as the self. Some call it as the consciousness, right? So, what's the problem with the self, man? It's not a problem per se. You simply look the functionings of the self. And what I see is very interesting. The way I look at it, every action of the self always seems like a form of distraction, a form of negation from something. There is a constant denial from something by the self. Imagine a sphere or a circle, if you will, and think of it which has a hole in it, a large hole, which seems like a void, an abyss. Alright. The self, in every action it does, tries to desperately patch up this hole, cover it up, right? That's what the self tries to do. It so desperately wants to cover up itself with something. When I talk about cover up, I talk about identification. The self loves to have something to identify it, be it a gender, a community, a religion, be it virtue, righteousness, honesty, be it experience, the past, memories, be it knowledge. The, the self likes to associate itself with many of these. It likes to think of itself as these things. And many of us do believe that is what we are. We start believing in the tale spun by ourselves, right? The self just loves to cover up itself with an identity. And then the other half of it is gratification, I would say, or feeling good, happiness, whatever you would call it in general, right? Like all of us have this desire to have a good life, a happy life. That is a very weird question. A happy life, then from past experiences, from past knowledge, we can clearly see that the mind cannot experience anything new. It can only experience the same thing again and again, only with different names and forms. So what could happiness even mean for the self? It could be unending gratification, everlasting gratification. That is the only way I could imagine what happiness could be associated with, right? Only we try to categorize this gratification in different levels. We want to label it. We want to think some are more noble. We think some are very degenerate and depraved. It must not be done, but at the core of it, at the base of it, the root of it all is the same. It's the same feeling. The mind cannot experience anything new, right? That is gratification. So, when you come back to that question, what does it mean to be happy? The mind is in a constant state of seeking gratification, seeking identification. Identification also feeds into gratification. It wants to ensure that the cover up stays, that it can somehow deceive itself into being, deceive itself into believing that it is indeed having something precious here. It is all a cover, a disacknowledgement of something, a constant denial of something. Why do I keep using the term denial, distraction? You see, the self can only create out of fear. That is the root of it all, right? Deeply within ourselves, there is fear. The self can only create out of fear. The self always wants to make sure that it has enough covered up above that state of fear so that it can deceive itself into believing that it is fine. It is a constant denial from what is underneath, constant running away from that hole, from that void or abyss. The self wants to be something. It cannot accept that it is nothing, because then it becomes contradictory, right? If I have to be, then I cannot possibly be nothing. That does not make sense, right? I have to be. If the self must be established, then there is a need for identification, gratification, and so on. Now, I come on to my recent readings. I have written on the board again another one. Let me wear my glasses real quick. Every movement of the mind is merely a form of strengthening the self. Anything that I do is within the limits or confines of the mind, which means it is an experience, and an experience can only ever strengthen the self. See, the mind is trapped in a circle of identification, a circle of gratification. It keeps spinning around in that spiral, locked within it, can never come out of it, because anything that it does can only take it further into the spiral. That is what it means. Every movement of the mind is merely a form of strengthening of the self. So now we come to a point. What can you see? What can you see when you experience the strengthening of the self? Not in understanding, not in, projected experiencing, not logically, not verbally, ideologically, not anything else. Actually be there when the strengthening of the self occurs. What do you see?